Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 406 of Linux in the Ham Shack. This is our deep dive episode, and tonight we will have an interview with our special guest who will be talking about his project. But before we get into that, I will say let's introduce the usual cast of characters. And I will introduce Cheryl, W5MOO, who is on assignment this week and will be back next time. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
Tonight we are going to be talking about another in a line, not a long line, I guess, but a line of projects we've talked about for doing amateur radio on different platforms. And this one is, well, kind of specific to Raspberry Pi, but also can be used in a PC scenario. It's called HamPi, and there's also HamPC, a variant of the same thing, for the platforms that are relevant to those two things. And we've brought in tonight the main developer and the creator of these projects, Dave Slaughter, W3DJS. Thanks for coming on tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Well, we love to have people on to talk about their projects because there's nobody better to talk about someone's project than the person who wrote it. What better way to dive deep into a topic than the people who have created the guts of a thing? And that thing is HamPi and HamPC, and we're going to find out what it is, what it does, how you can get it, and how you can use it here pretty soon. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about Dave. Let's find out a little bit about you, your history in maybe coding, your history in amateur radio, and anything else you might want to tell us about you that kind of leads us up to the project we're going to talk about next.
Oh, okay, a little bit about myself. Just to give context here, HamPi is a software image for the Raspberry Pi. And in that greater context, I've been involved with computers actually longer than I've been involved with ham radio. The story starts when I was age 9, and I happened across a Texas Instruments TI-994A in one of the local Sears at my mall. Of course, malls are a bit of a dying breed nowadays, but back then in the 80s, they were very much thriving. And I sat down at this little TI. It was at a desk in Sears, and I tried playing around with it and kept getting these syntax errors. But being a inquisitive person, I started digging around the desk drawers, and lo and behold, I found a program written in BASIC on a piece of paper. So I typed the whole thing in, which took quite a while, but since I was age 9, I guess I didn't really care about how long it took. And when I actually typed in run, the computer came back with syntax error on like line 60. And so I printed out line 60 again and compared it to the piece of paper, saw where I had made my mistake, retyped in the line, and typed in run again. And all of a sudden, I had a little sine wave printing on the screen with little asterisks. So that began a very long career, both as a hobby as well as a career in computers and software development, which has gone up to the present day. And in the present day, I've gotten much more involved with ham radio, probably in the last 5 years. I got licensed right around 2000, give or take, but I really didn't use my license for a long time. It's really been the as far as working on 2 meters and 70 centimeters FM. Probably the last 5 years, but with HF, I've only really been using HF for the last 2 years. So HamPi came into being when I started doing digital modes and getting more involved with combining the computers and the radios.
All right, very good. So you said this is an image for Raspberry Pi. Well, that usually means it's based on something else, so I guess we'll get to that. But do you do anything specifically coding-wise, or is this just an assemblage of applications to give you like a running shack, PC or single-board computer or something like that? I mean, we're going to get further into this, but let's just start with the top level.
That's a very enlightened question. And the way I'm going to answer it is that the very first version of HamPi was didn't have a name. I just simply called it the W3DJS image for Raspberry Pi and ham radio. And there was a version 1 and a version 2 of that. That was put together by hand and was done manually. When I saw how much interest there actually was in it, I decided to put this together using an automated software toolkit. And that automated software toolkit is called Ansible. Ansible is for deploying software and configurations in the enterprise, but can also be used as a hobbyist ham radio type computer setup. And so I've put together dozens and dozens of Ansible playbooks that get stitched together in one big playbook that run on a Raspberry Pi 4 for about 7 hours to construct HamPi. So it is very much put together using an automated method and a very streamlined and very error-proof method. While there's no such thing as absolute perfection, this is much more perfect than anybody putting this together by hand.
Well, except to say that you've put it together by hand into Ansible playbooks, right? I mean, somebody put it together by hand.
Well, sure. I wrote the Ansible playbooks, and they are available on GitHub for inspection. So if people want to look at them and find any errors and create issues, I'll happily fix any issues that come up. But for the most part, when the Raspberry Pi starts up and with the image and boots into the HamPi image, which is the automated version, things just work. There's a nice GUI there's a nice GUI desktop. It's built on top of XFCE, and I'm not sure if there's a particular way to pronounce that. But it comes with a menu, and you click on the Raspberry Pi menu, and it pops down, and there's literally a ham radio menu item, which then has a number of sub-menu items depending on the categories of ham radio software. So instead of having one big, long, monolithic menu, you have a number of sub-menus where it's easier to navigate to everything.
All right. Well, let's first say that you've just made John G7VRI very happy because you built this on Ansible, and that's like his life's work. So, So are you saying there's two different ways to do this? One running through Ansible playbooks and one pre-built installable image? Or did I mishear what you were saying just now?
When I deploy the software to end users, essentially I'm deploying an image that is something that people can burn to a SD card, or rather micro SD card, or even to an SSD and run it without having to put together anything. They just boot it up and launch their programs, configure them, and then run. It's pretty much plug and play. From my end, in order to create the image, I run Ansible here in my shack on one of my Raspberry Pi 4s, and it runs the Ansible playbooks for about 7 hours. And there's a number of steps that happen before Ansible that are manual, and there are a number of steps after Ansible that are manual in order to package the software. And I have automated most of the packaging steps. So essentially, if an end user wants to get much closer to HamPi, they can go to GitHub and clone my repository for HamPi and play with it locally themselves, and they can build their own variants of HamPi, subject to the license, of course.
Well, that's a nice segue into licensing, and we like to talk about that here. We're going to assume, since it's hosted on GitHub and that you're here with us on the show, that it is some form of open source license. So how is HamPi licensed?
It's actually a custom license that I wrote. I am not a lawyer, but essentially what the license does is gives people the ability to modify it as long as they keep in my attributions. And we're not just talking about some about boxes. There's actually a dialogue that appears when you start up, and it basically says, "Hey, I'm QSLware. If you want to get rid of this dialogue, go ahead and send a QSL card to W3DJS, and you can find his address on QRZ." So as long as that's not removed, I'm pretty happy with things.
Okay. Well, and obviously the source is available because you've published it on GitHub, so that, I guess, makes it open source, regardless of the the QSL license, which is kind of a nice license, kind of like beerware, but QSL instead of beer, both of which are kind of cool. So you do set it up so that if you clone the repo, you can run through the Ansible scripts and build it yourself, so you could make tweaks to it if you wanted to. But if you don't do that, if you just download an image, it will have everything pre-installed, of course. So this is an image. I mean, you'll download it as an img.exe thing. You'll burn it onto your micro SD, and you can boot up your Pi with it. And when that happens, what will someone who's using this actually see when they boot it up for the first time?
Well, when they boot it up and they're looking at the desktop that eventually appears, there's a custom desktop that has a blue background with the HamPi logo pretty much front and center, and it says HamPi by W3DJS. There's a couple of dialogues that pop up. One is about being QSLware. Another one is about changing your password because it's using a default password for the image. But once the person clicks through those two, they can pretty much just run it as is. They see a menu bar, and they can click on the Raspberry Pi menu bar, and they'll see the ham radio menu. Select that, and then a bunch of submenus appear, and they can launch programs off of that. There are at least 90 ham radio software applications included with HamPi. And so we don't have a menu that's a mile long. All of these are divided up into types like weak signal. For example, with weak signal, you're going to have your WSJTX and JTDX software programs, as well as their associated programs. In addition, I think grid trackers under that menu. There's an antenna analyzer or antenna visualizer menu. There's one for voice. There's another one for D-Star, which has DRATs under it. So it's just categories like that.
All right, very good. So I was going to ask you, let's see, where was I going to go? So you have all these applications. Were there any of these applications that you had to do anything special with, or are they just installed from the playbook and installed by default, or did you customize any of them to make anything work better that might be broken in a standard install or something like that? Or is there anything you were particularly customizing or installing that might be sort of esoteric for a normal amateur radio user of computers?
There are a couple of modifications that have been made, and once again, one can look at the Ansible playbooks and see all the modifications I made. The biggest one is that these ham radio applications were under very simple categories under the menu system, and in order to get them under the hierarchical ham radio menus, I've had to rewrite their desktop files, just specifically the categories line, so that they would show up under the proper submenus. There was one very problematic program because it's very old, and you're probably familiar with David Lim, PA7 LIM, I think. He wrote Blue DV, and the version of Blue DV that's Linux-based is several years old, and when I would launch it, it might come up, but when I would try to bring up its settings dialog, it would immediately crash. I had to create a custom settings INI file for it. Yeah, believe it or not, even though it's under Linux, it's an INI file. And that was able to fix the crashing problem. But that was a particularly outstanding case. Most applications install without too much in the way of tweaks.
All right, that's cool. I was looking through the list of applications. There's quite a few here. I did want to ask, and I almost forgot to ask, when the installer does the image, does it do the resize and everything, so you're able to use the full capacity of your SD card and all of that? So if you want to do logging or anything on your install disk, you're good to go there.
Okay, so the software image is based upon Raspberry Pi OS, the full distribution. They basically have a full distribution, a small distribution, then a lean distribution. And I'm using the biggest one of the three. When their distributions start up, they do an auto resize. And I tried to duplicate that with my image, and I thought I was doing the same things they're doing, but apparently it doesn't work. So one actually does have to go to Raspberry Pi config and do that step manually. And it's definitely something that has gotten under my skin to fix. But it's just one of these things that seems to be a little. There's apparently a magical handshake that they're doing that I'm not doing to make it work. So whenever I figure it out, it will be fixed.
Is that included in your documentation anywhere during the install procedure? I have not actually gone through all of the docs you have out there.
That's mentioned on the community support groups. I'm not sure. And I have another person that writes the wiki, so I'm not actually sure if that's in the wiki. I've skimmed over the wiki, but I haven't read most of it. Surprisingly, I'm really good about putting together the image, but using the software is a totally another matter.
Well, you do use the software, right? You wrote it after all, or you compiled it after all.
I use probably about 20% of the applications on there. 80% I really don't use on a daily basis.
Well, right, but you do use HamPi, in your shack as your image. So you're doing it with like rig control interfaces and things like that based on your Raspberry Pi? Are you doing the whole digital thing with weak signal and all that? Yes,
I am. I am eating my own dog food. Specifically, I'll run FLRig, FLDigi, FLMessage, WSJTX, DRATS, Zaster, which is an APRS client, which I'm sure you're familiar with, since it's Linux. This is specifically Linux. Is not. I don't think it's cross-platform. HamClock. So I use a fair number of applications, but there is a good portion of the software that I haven't touched.
Yeah, that's the same for me. So are you familiar with the Debian Ham Radio Pure Blend?
I have not used it.
Okay. Well, that's going to make the next question kind of hard to answer, because I was going to ask you how you find this different than the Debian Ham Radio Pure Blend, because it's a meta package that was created for Debian probably 4 or 5 years ago now, I guess, that references all the available ham radio software that's been packaged for Debian Linux. And if you install this meta package, then it installs like all of these things and gives you essentially an image of ham radio software. But of course, it's a two-step process, because you have to do the install first, and then you have to do the install of the meta package. So the work that you've done to create all of this is done in the background, and then someone gets an image, so it's a pre-created ham radio image. So you're saving a step for sure. So I'm not sure you can actually compare and contrast them, because you're not really familiar with the Pure Blend.
Well, I can compare based on what you just said, and HamPi is a finished image, whereas what you're talking about is somebody's running Debian or maybe a Debian variant, and we'll go ahead and install that meta package, and then they take their time and everything, goes and so forth. So, I mean, there is a difference as far as the installation selection. And there's also another difference, too. I'm not sure about the Debian Ham Blend, but HamPi has a community support group on groups.io, and basically people will share their different issues that they have. If somebody's having a problem getting something set up, there's usually somebody else on there to be able to answer to help them along with their individual problem.
Oh, yeah, it's good. It's always nice if there's an actual support community around a project, because that way you know exactly where to go to find answers to your questions. And I heard Bill unmute for a second there, so he probably had something to interject.
No, I was just here. I haven't muted.
I heard myself coming back to me for a second, so I thought you might have wanted to say something. Well, do you want to say something?
Oh, I can always say something.
Well, I know you can always say something, but do you want to say something? Do you have something relevant and interesting to say, I guess, is what I'm asking.
No, I was just, well, I probably do, yeah. So let's, I was just kind of looking through all of the software, and of course you were talking about the Ham Radio Pure Blend, which installs a lot of stuff, and installs a ham radio menu item inside of your windowing environment, your desktop environment, and it installs a bunch of applications, but it doesn't install everything that he has here set up on the playbook, especially stuff that's specific to some of the newer SDR software and stuff that is not included, only because it's barely included in some of the some of the repos. So that's kind of interesting. I did have a question a bit on the license. Having a custom license on top of stuff that is GPL'd, is that normal? I don't know if that is. I don't know if that's.
I'm not a lawyer either. I don't know if that's
GPL,
acceptable.
yeah. I know you can't alter the license of anything, even if you package it, of GPL software. So I'm just wondering if you've had any questions about that particular custom license.
I don't believe there are any incompatibilities between a custom license and a GPL. My license does not seek to take away any of the rights and responsibilities for the included software packages.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure. I just normally if it's GPL underneath, it needs to remain that, because you typically can't change the terms of the license. You can't add any restrictions or anything else.
Let me just say that it might be that the package, the image as a package, might be able to be licensed as something other than GPL, but the software underneath it would still be GPL. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, but I'm speculating that HamPi as a project, as an assembled image, could be distributed under a different license, but the software contained within cannot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I just didn't know. I was like, just seemed a little odd, but yeah, it looks really interesting. I know I was trying. This is what I was trying to do before we started, to actually get the HamPC side loaded and running on a PC, but I failed to actually get it to go, because I needed a larger image than 16 gig. For the PC, it expands to 17.2 gig. So I was like, oh, where's my 32 gig sticks? so I found a 32 gig stick. I was like, okay, I got it. So I put it on there. And then I was like, oh, which PC am I going to try this on? So the only one I had was that I could turn off and turn back on quickly was this HP all-in-one. And well, I got the grub menu, and now it looks like it has a video issue, and it's blinking cursor. So I have to go back and actually try it out and see everything under the hood. And I do have a few Raspberry Pis here on the desktop, but I did not load that image quite yet. So I'm kind of excited to take a sneak peek, because I'm looking at some of the SDR stuff you got on here.
I was kind of curious about SDR Angel, and if you've tried to use it, Dave, on a Raspberry Pi, because it seems a little heavyweight, and I have not had good luck running it on PCs with, what I would consider adequate hardware. And I don't know if you've tried it on a Pi, and does it work?
It launches. I actually don't know how to operate SDR Angel. If somebody wants to show me how to do it, I'll certainly give it a try on the Pi. But I have communicated with the author, the primary author of SDR Angel, because at one point there was a discrepancy between the software repo for SDR Angel, the GitHub repo, and the build instructions. And it took a little bit of back and forth for me to get him to realize what the issue was. But once I got past that communications obstacle, then we were able to, I was able to get SDR Angel to build on HamPi. And that's actually one of the big pieces. It takes about 65 to 70 minutes to build on a Raspberry Pi 4. When you launch it, it takes about a minute to start up. But once it's up and running, it seems to be pretty responsive. But I have not actually turned it on, so to speak, and actually run it through its modes, because I don't know how it actually works.
I think you'll
by comparison.
Oh, sorry.
By comparison, Cubic SDR, I've used that on the Raspberry Pi 4, and it runs great. And GQRX, that also runs great. Now, if you're running on a Raspberry Pi 3, that barely has enough horsepower to run GQRX. Cubic SDR is The audio comes out very choppy, so it's really not usable. And I would assume that SDR Angel on a Raspberry Pi 3 is pretty much a lost cause.
I think you're correct, and I think SDR Angel on Raspberry Pi 4 might be as well, unless you just turn everything off. Unless you turn, the waterfall off, the spectrum diagram, if you turn everything off and have it just decoding SDR signals, it might be functional, but I'm going to guess no. GQRX tends to be much lighter weight and will run on lower capacity hardware for sure. So I know it has no issue with running on a Raspberry Pi 4 or anything like that. So Bill mentioned HamPC, which of course is the AMD 64 variant of this instead of the ARM version. But other than that, is it exactly the same? Is it something you could do an install from? Is there an installer on a PC type version, or is it just run from a stick, just like HamPi?
Okay, so very good questions there. I may not remember every one, so I might have you repeat some of those. HamPC is very much an initial build. This is the very first build of HamPC from December. It is beta software, and I've seen people who were able to get it to work, and I've seen people who had no luck getting it to work. One of the things, and this may be a mistake on my part, since I do not have as much experience building live boots for x86 64 PCs or AMD 64 PCs that I do with the Raspberry Pi, but it is built on a UEFI boot rather than a legacy boot. So I believe that the next build I'm going to do a legacy boot for instead of UEFI. And it is not exactly the same as HamPi. It's 95% the same. It's got the same menu structure. It's got the same applications, except there are probably about 3 or 4 Raspberry Pi applications that are specific to the Raspberry Pi that don't work on the PC. So those are excluded. But this is the powerful thing about Ansible. I'm using the very same Ansible playbook to install for the Raspberry Pi as well as install for the x86 PC. So the exact same steps are occurring to install the software. There are maybe a couple of minor differences here and there where you have some things which are PC specific. This is built on top of the Ubuntu image, and I chose that because it also uses the XFCE window manager, and I'm able to get the same hierarchical menus working under the PC. So it's providing the same user interface experience.
Okay, and I think the other question I had in there, was it installer-based, or is it just write an image to a stick and boot from the stick kind of thing? Or can you install it on, like, a hard drive?
I do not have an installer for it. It's basically copy the image to a stick. What I want to do is change it. Right now, it's basically a disk image. What I want to do is change it to a bootable ISO format. And this is something I don't have a lot of experience with. So if you or any of your subscribers would like to help me with that, I would certainly welcome that assistance.
Well, Bill might be able to help you with that using Cubic. I don't know if you can combine Cubic with Ansible to do something. Oh, okay. So
you could run all your Ansible scripts probably right inside of Cubic once it sets up the image, and then you'd end up with a live ISO with everything installed. The only problem would be, would it install everything? I don't know when you click the installer. It has no problem if you add Debs to it and stuff like that, but I see you do a lot of compiling, especially pulling daily builds from like not WSJTX, but FLDigi and stuff like that, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
I don't pull in daily builds. I pull in release versions, and that's a good point you brought up. Dave W1HKJ of FLDigi fame, he has release versions and then he has alpha versions. This does not build alpha versions of FLDigi, and it does not install the pre-release of WSJTX. In fact, HamPi from which I just released version 1.3 this last month in March, includes WSJTX 2.3.0, even though Bill Somerville and Joe Taylor have a 2.4.0 RC4, I believe. So yeah, no pre-release software.
You just grabbed the current version, basically. That's what I was seeing. You rename the file when you save it. That's why I thought you'd get the daily build. But yeah, I see you grab the main release candidate that's actually sitting there, or actually general availability release.
You just touched on something that I'm very proud of. I have some specialized curl/grep code, which will search through the web page for the latest version string for a number of different pieces of software, including WSJTX. So if somebody has different versions of their software available on a web page, it will grab the most recent version, typically. So I'm pretty happy and also proud that I've created that.
I was just running through the list of software here, and it shows GPS support as a general item, not as a particular application. So does that have support for actual Raspberry Pi-based GPS, like hats and dongles and things?
Okay, so what's not mentioned there is that it's got support for the draws board for Raspberry Pi. The draws requires a special version of GPSD. So the GPSD software is pulled down and compiled, and I even run a single line of code of GPSD through SED to rewrite it so it will compile correctly. So it's got general GPS support available on it.
All right, very good. I also see that Ted Williams software is all in here, all the TW things. So Ted will be happy to hear that you've included all of that. I see there's also FreeDV, so the Codec 2 project and Free Digital Voice is represented. Qtel, so you've got Echolink, Chirp, APRS, WeFax. Wow. Yeah, it's all kind of in here.
Well, except for two big ones, right? We got MVoice and DudeStar.
MVoice and DudeStar. Yeah, we definitely need to have you add those for sure.
For M17.
DudeStar is definitely on my to-do list. I just found out about it recently. See, I don't know all of the programs out there, so what I depend upon is users like yourself to say, I want program XYZ, and then if you go to the issues page on my GitHub and file a ticket, I will happily add software to the HamPi image for the next release. So that's how I find out about it is through users like you guys.
Very good. Well, DudeStar definitely needs to be included because that's going to be a very popular piece of software. Well, it already is a very popular piece of software, and it's going to be even more popular if it shows up on all these precompiled ham radio-based images as they go forward, because it allows you access to all of the available digital modes, including M17, which is new and shiny and will be something for the future ages. So definitely somebody, if not me or Bill, will submit an issue so that you include DudeStar on the next release for sure. Just going down through the list, it's a lot of stuff that everyone's familiar with. Trusted QSL is also in here, PyQSO. So loggers, let's talk about loggers. I see CQR log is in there, and there's always a problem with CQR log properly installing MariaDB. Have you addressed that issue, or do you just hope it works?
It's installed on there, and I smoke tested it. It started up and ran. I didn't really get into very much with that because for the most part, I do CQR log on my laptop computer. With the Raspberry Pi, I mainly run WSJTX and FLDigi on it. I save the trusted QSL and the CQR log to my main laptop. And what I do is I have a shell script for Bash that will do an rsync between the Raspberry Pi and my laptop. And then I have another shell script that does it in the reverse direction. So I will back up my WSJTX log file. And then I have another program it's also included on HamPi that will upload my ADIF log entries to eQSL club log, and logbook of the world, and it maintains a high watermark, so it's not uploading my 10,000 FT QSOs. It's only uploading the last 50 I did, or the last 10, or whatever number is the new number of QSOs I have. So it maintains a high watermark and only uploads the deltas.
All right, and I'm going to put this out here now because I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say so, but it also needs to include Grid Tracker.
It's on there.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's under the weak signal apps. And Grid Tracker was one of those apps that required a little bit of modification to the install to get it to work properly on the Pi 4.
Yeah, I've had some issues with them talking about the ARM64 builds as well. So I'm glad to see that you've got it working. And I'm glad to see it's on there. They just released a new version actually a couple of days ago too. But we're not here to talk about Grid Tracker, even though it does come up a lot. Don posted a picture of his Pi cluster in the chat. Wow. Oh, wish we all had like all those Pis we could waste on a cluster. But anyway, back to HamPi.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten from the project? I mean, you have a groups IO for what, both images, just different ones?
There's a groups.io for HamPi and a separate groups.io for HamPC. HamPC hasn't taken off as well as HamPi yet, but that's also because it's a much newer product, and then lots of people already have Unix solutions for laptop and desktop computers that they're comfortable with. So HamPi is a relative newcomer in an area that already has some pre-existing, if you want to call it, competition. So I think it'll take a little while for HamPC to find its place. Anyway, one more thing. You guys were going through the applications.
Yeah.
Here's another really big one. It's Universal Ham Radio Remote. It literally is remote control of your radio from like a smartphone or tablet to your Pi connected to your rig. It will send and receive audio, and it does rig control, so you can change the frequencies and the mode settings.
So tell me about that, because I haven't heard about that. Would that be similar to what they have on like the Rig Pi?
It's pretty much the same thing, except for it's open source and it's not as polished. UHRR is the abbreviation for it. I'll see if I can get the website address here for you momentarily.
Yeah, I'm into the package here, so I can get it from there. I see it's an F4 HTB project he's got on GitHub. So I will definitely take a look at that. We have reviewed RigPi on here. I guess it's been a while, maybe 6 months ago or something like that, before they released the new version. And they have, the UI portion of that does have some encumbrances for them to release it out. But this is one I haven't specifically heard of, and that's why we like doing these little finding about people's projects, because they find out about stuff that we haven't heard about yet. And tell me. Well, you don't have to tell me a little bit about that, but how did you find it?
I heard about it through basically one of the shows like yourself. It was either like Ham Radio 2.0 or Ham Radio Crash Course or somewhere on the web. I honestly don't remember where I learned about it, but it was either a YouTube video or maybe it was on QRZ or somewhere else on the web. But when I found out about it, I immediately pulled it down and tried it out, found a bunch of issues, and then since I'm a coder, I went ahead and did a bunch of local changes to my local Git repository, and then pushed it up sent it up as a pull request, and the author actually accepted a bunch of my changes. So it's a better product because of my contribution under, I'm assuming, the GPL. Yeah, it says GPL 3 license.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I have seen this now that I just navigated over there. So I probably saw one of the earlier versions of this. So we'll have to take a look at that in a little bit more detail. later on, or a whole nother show just to do that. What else on here is, I see you have team viewers installed. Is that to help people be able to get to their screens easier?
Actually, TeamViewer is not installed because that's commercial.
I just saw it in the playbook. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a playbook for it, but it's not actually run. I think it's disabled or turned off. I was looking at installing. I was looking at installing an installer for people that could run to download and install TeamViewer, but I never actually finished up on that. Other things became higher priorities.
Yeah. Plus, they can already do VNC or whatever to their Pi, so shouldn't be that hard for people to get to their the Raspberry Pi's desktop.
Yeah, VNC runs great on there. And in my particular situation, first off, I've changed the SSH port. It's no longer 22. And I've turned off password authentication, so it's key-based only. But I've put my Pi up on the web. Now, since I've been playing around with it, it's not currently up on the web this second, but I have put it up on the web in the past. And when I'm at my local ham radio club, we meet at the believe it or not, our local airfield, our county airstrip in one of the hangars. I'm able to access my Pi from there, and I've demoed it off to groups of people at our local ham club, and it's run perfectly over there.
I see you have Boink on here as well. What are you using that for?
Boink is on there because that's part of the license that people have had a problem with. Specifically, Joe Taylor, if you're familiar with him, he got a Nobel Prize because he discovered the first pulsar. Mm-hmm. Well, what Boink is doing on there is it's running only on idle time. So when you're using the device, it backs off and it doesn't run. But when the device is sitting there idle and not running on battery power, it will go ahead and search for pulsars through radio telescope observations. So this fits in line with ham radios, and that's doing radio telescope research. And it's basically trying to help find other pulsars. It's mentioned very clearly in the license and also the README that's there. And if people are really adamant that they don't like it, they can turn it off. But it's an opt-out solution.
Okay, yeah, so it's on by default. They would have to opt out manually themselves.
That's correct.
At this point, we try and let you address anything we may not have touched on that you think is of particular importance to your project, or we just sort of neglected because we were skimming down through the list of applications or whatever. Or just tell us anything else about your project or anything else that you think our listeners might want to know about.
Oh, there are two things I'd like to mention. One is, we didn't touch upon every category. Just like your ham radio blends for Debian, there is an antennas category and a digital voice and logging category. We didn't talk about any of the Morse apps, but the Morse apps are kind of a bit older on there. They're like, convert this text file or ebook into like an MP3 file with Morse code at 15 words a minute or 18 words a minute or something like that. There's also some packet applications on there, some DX cluster software. In fact, for the DX cluster, there's both clients and there is one server called DX Spider. And so if somebody wants to run a DX cluster server, they can on it. There's also satellite applications, specifically GPredict is on there, and there's another one which I don't remember the name of for satellite prediction. We did talk about the software-defined radio, and there's also tutorial/training, although those applications are quite a bit older and I'm not sure are even pertinent, but it's the latest that's available, so those are included. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you asked me what appears on the desktop, and of course I said that the HamPi logo appears on top of a blue background. But also there are 3 files on the desktop. One is the README for HamPi. The second is the draws instructions. If somebody has a draws board that wants to use it with HamPi, HamPi supports draws pretty much out of the box. The third one is a give back PDF, which I hope people will open up. It talks about very briefly my history with family courts, custody, and divorce. And it's a plea to people. It's a request to people to, if they can donate just a small amount of money to the Fathers' Rights Movement or another charity called Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. These are both organizations that support what's called a rebuttable presumption of 50-50 shared parenting. Right now, your listeners may or may not know the way divorce courts are structured in pretty much all 50 states, although as of yesterday, it's now 48 states because Arkansas just passed this law. One person after divorce, one parent becomes a regular parent or stays a parent, and the other parent becomes what's called a non-custodial parent, which is a fancy term for visitor. And what that means is that the children of divorce don't get to see both parents all the time. 85% of the time, the father becomes a non-custodial parent, but 15% of the time it's the mother that becomes a non-custodial parent. Children deserve parents, not visitors. And so what the give back is basically to raise awareness about this. This is affecting millions and millions and millions of kids in the United States alone. And of course, other countries as well. But I'm just trying to focus on my country here. So that's pretty much that. I just wanted to say that HamPi and HamPC have two charities, Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, which is trying to pass the 50-50 laws and shared parenting laws in the U.S., and the Fathers' Rights Movement, which supports not just fathers, but parents, mothers, and kids too in divorce. So that's pretty much it. And thank you for letting me do my little spiel on that.
Oh, not at all. That's fine. I mean, most of the people when we ask them what we've forgotten, it's something about the project or anything like that. I'm not sure we've had any like actual activism before today, which is fine. Absolutely fine. I'm all about supporting good causes. And Tony in the chat room wanted to know if you could elaborate on any support that HamPi has for SDR Play that you're aware of, or describe it, because he's tried several other distributions that do not support it properly or do not support it at all.
That's my favorite SDR. I've got two of them. So thank you, listener, whoever you are, for asking about SDR Play. I have an SDR Play 2, RSP2, and I have an SDR Play RSP DX. And HamPi supports both of them with Cubic SDR and GQRX. Now, I haven't launched Cubic SDR under the HamPi 1.3 build, but I would be incredibly surprised if it did not work for some reason. And if it doesn't work, let me know, and I will fix it post-haste, because that's my favorite SDR, is the SDR Play, for receive only, of course.
All right, good. Well, you got a cool with multiple exclamation points. So, and if it doesn't work, I'm sure you'll be hearing about it. So, all right, excellent.
Hey, I've developed a very thick skin over the time HamPi's been out. What's cool about something like this, and there have been over 30,000 downloads of HamPi to date. What's cool about this is that after you get some level of success, then you build up some haters. And I have some haters now, so that tells me I've gotten some level of success. So I'm pretty happy about getting the haters.
Yeah, absolutely. When this show first started getting hate mail, we knew we'd made it. So, all right, that's good. Anything else that you want to touch on? I know you brought up your points and your charity and everything, but is there anything else we didn't touch on? We'll of course have links to the project and the wiki and the group's IO and all that stuff in the show notes, so people will be able to find you and get support and everything and test out the HamPi project. But is there any last thing you want to touch on before we go ahead and wrap this up?
I basically just want people to enjoy HamPi. It's not for everybody, but then it's definitely for somebody, because I know there's been 30,000 plus downloads of it in the last year and so many months. Just have fun with it. If you have any issues with it, join the HamPi community support group on groups.io and post the problems that you're having, and we'll try to solve them. Lots of people have used HamPi for Go boxes, Go kits. Out in the field, I had some scouting troops emailing me saying, hey, can you add such and such software? So I added it to the next version. If you want changes made to it, there is an issues page on the HamPi GitHub page. And also, HamPi isn't just other people's software. It's my software, too. Specifically, I've written a number of Python scripts that get included with HamPi. A couple of them are around WSJTX. One of them is a log file adapter, which allows WSJTX under Linux to talk to N3FJP under Windows. N3FJP doesn't natively talk directly to WSJTX, and on the PC, there are third-party apps that connect it, but those are Windows-based apps. So I wanted to provide a Linux-based solution. Also, WSJTX doesn't give you, when you log new entries, it has an empty name field. So I wrote a program that does a lookup on QRZ or calllook.info, and maybe eventually I'll add QTH, whatever the rest of the website name is, support. But it basically edits the log entries after they get written. It appends the name to the logs. So I mean, there's a number of my applications included with this, and it's very much a labor of love, and it gets better when people let me know that if something's not working. I mean, while I appreciate getting the fan mail and all the good words, I need to hear the criticism too. Just be gentle about it. Anyway, just thank you very much. And one other thing about the popularity. So I watched the Howard Stern movie, Private Parts, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, however long it was. And they showed the NBC executives after they hired him said, well, they were getting tons and tons of fan mail and phone calls and so forth. And the phone calls, they said, how long are our listeners listening? And they said, oh, the people that like Howard Stern are listening 2 hours. And then they said, well, what about the people that don't like him? Oh, well, they really stay on the station. They listen to him for about 6 hours. So the people that hated him were actually giving him the most amount of attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why we asked that question, because we wouldn't have asked about any of that stuff if we hadn't left it open for you to bring up. All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Dave, for being here tonight and for telling us all about HamPi and these projects. I'm looking forward to giving one a spin here and seeing how it works. I've probably got to pick up a couple of more pies here before too long, and because I've actually used them all up at this point. So I'm going to get a couple of pies. I'm going to try this on one. I'm curious to see how some of these applications work, and I'm interested in seeing how you're progressing with this. And I love to see that the development is active and that you're actively taking requests and issues and complaints from the community and treating them with respect and dealing with them appropriately. So it's always great.
I forgot to mention one more thing. So another developer who's very familiar with Ansible, and he's retired, unlike myself, because I have a day job. He reached out to me because he wants to help out with an ARM64 build of this HamPi. And I told him, go right ahead. And so I don't know how far he's gotten yet exactly, because we just started talking, but hopefully he's able to make some good things happen. And so right now, HamPi is 32-bit on a 64-bit ARM processor. So he's working on an ARM 64 build of HamPi. So we'll see how that comes along.
All right, fantastic. Well, it's always good to see active development, and I know we'll be keeping in touch to find out where you're going with the project, and maybe we'll have you on again at some point in the future so you can tell us all the great new things that have shown up in HamPi. But in the meantime, we'll probably go ahead and wrap this up and let you get on with your evening. I know it's getting late for you out there in the Eastern time zone, but thanks once again for being here. We're really glad you were here to share the project with us.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you, Bill, for having me on tonight. It was my pleasure.
All right, fantastic. Anything you got, Bill, before I wrap this up, just to make sure I'm covering all our bases?
No. Thank you. Thank you again, Dave. And yeah, we look forward to seeing this project continue to grow.
Okay, thank you in 73.
All right. Thank you. Thank you once again. Have a great evening. And we hope all the people who have been listening to this also have a great evening and a great week until we record again. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We do not have any feedback or announcements tonight that I'm aware of, unless Bill has something that he has not made me aware of.
Nothing that is time pressing. So no, but we probably want to mention those folks in the chat room.
Yes, we should do that. We had with us tonight Darren, VK6EK, all the way from Down Under. We had Tony, K4XSS, who gave us the great question about SDR Angel. We had Don, KC9ZMY, Don, KB2YSI, and probably other people that we don't know about. But thanks, everybody, for listening to us live, and thanks, everybody who's downloaded the program and listened to it after the fact. And maybe you should join us on Discord or via the streaming live audio some night. Hear us live and hear all the stuff you don't get to hear in the released version. But with that, let's go ahead and wrap this up. This has been an episode with Dave, W3DJS, author of HamPi and HamPC, episode number 406, our deep dive episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. And for the On Assignment, Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD 73.